In addition to using a certain level of formality in your academic writing, you also need to write using a particular academic style. And that means there are certain rules of writing you must adhere to if you want to give yourself the best chance of getting the best grade. Here are the 5 essential rules of good academic writing. Essential rule number 1, avoid making vague references by referring to lots of, some, or many theorists, concepts, ideas, or statistics, and completely avoid using etc. All of these words are vague and don't give any specific meaning to anything you're writing about, so they don't contribute anything to your argument, analysis, or discussion. Instead, give the exact names of authors of specific ideas, theories, or arguments you're referring to, and of course, reference them correctly. Always research and cite exact statistics from credible, reliable sources to back up your point or evidence your argument. So in this first example, instead of many researchers say that, the exact authors should be written along with the year their book or paper was published. And the second example can be rewritten again by stating exact names and publication dates of specific authors along with exact statistics. Your reader, who's also the person marking your paper and awarding your grade, and is usually an expert in the subject you're writing about, wants to know exactly which facts, theories, ideas and findings you've researched, read and understood. It's your job to impress your reader and show them how much you understand. This leads us on to essential rule number 2. Avoid making sweeping generalised statements such as everybody knows that, or an example I've seen a lot recently is everyone uses social media these days. We form generalisations such as these based on our own biased perspectives and experiences of the world, which tend to be more subjective than objective. So what may be true for you and your social group isn't necessarily true for everyone else. Instead, write in an objective way by researching actual facts using reliable sources and referencing them correctly. Your reader is looking for a well-researched, original and correctly constructed answer to the question they've set or that you've come up with. One extra tip here, if you use the work of several authors or theorists to make the same point, reference all of them according to your department or school's referencing guidelines. If you're studying across different subject areas, you may need to learn more than one referencing system as different departments tend to have differing guidelines and referencing conventions. The 2 most common ways to reference multiple authors are either individually as part of your sentence structure separated by a comma, as in the first example here, or you can list them all together at the end of your sentence separated by a semicolon within the brackets. Moving on to essential rule number 3, avoid overuse of the first person, which is I or we, and the second person, which is you or your. For example, in this essay, I am going to tell you, or we the people of our community. Instead, write using what's called the passive voice to construct an objective, reasoned argument or discussion. Check out the link in the description below if you want to learn and understand more about using the passive voice. So instead, in this essay, I'm going to tell you should be written as this essay discusses or this essay will argue. And instead of using we, our or us, refer just to people, humans or society in general, as in the example here. A quick extra tip here, you can use the first person in certain forms of writing, but that tends to be when writing reflectively about your own learning experience, writing up your research methodology and explaining how you, as the researcher, conducted the research, or when you're fulfilling a specific requirement of the assignment brief to add your personal perspective to your discussion or analysis. However, you still need to phrase your personal perspective as part of the intellectual analysis, discussion, or argument. That leads us on to essential rule number 4. Avoid giving your personal opinion or viewpoint on the topic you're discussing or analysing unless you're specifically told to. This rule also overlaps with Rule 5 of the 5 rules of formal writing, which is to avoid emotive or sensationalist vocabulary, as when we're asserting our views or opinions about something, we tend to use emotive or even sensationalist language to express how strongly we feel. Instead, your aim is to write a fully researched, referenced argument backed up by information and evidence you've researched from reliable, credible sources. If you are asked to give your views, as mentioned before, phrase them as a balanced argument and give reasons why you have those views to justify your perspective. Finally, essential rule number 5, avoid using direct questions in your writing. Direct questions are rhetorical, so contribute nothing to your argument or discussion. Also, as you have to give the answer to the question immediately afterwards, they just use up your valuable word count. Instead, rephrase questions as statements that contain contribute a point to your argument or discussion and move it forward to its conclusion. As in the example here, the question that's immediately followed by the answer should be rephrased as a statement that makes a point that contributes to answering the essay question. And that's your aim, to write sentences and paragraphs that continually move your discussion or analysis forward to a meaningful conclusion. One last extra tip here, as I've just mentioned in Rule 5, using rhetorical questions uses up your valuable word count and you'll probably get penalised if you exceed the set word limit. I've known students have as much as 10% knocked off their grade because they crammed in far too much content and went way over the word count set out in the assignment brief. If you have a tendency to go over the word count, you may need to spend more time fully interpreting the question to establish exactly what it's asking you to write about and not write about. If you struggle to meet the minimum word count for your assignment, then you probably need to spend more time researching and reading so you can write in more depth about the subject. Finally, remember the fundamental rules of good assignment writing. Write with the reader in mind. And yes, that's the person who's marking your paper and awarding your grade and who is usually an expert in the subject you're writing about. Give your reader nothing or as little as possible to complain about, so check and edit your work thoroughly before you submit it. Always interpret your assignment brief thoroughly to plan out what you do and don't need to write about. And of course, always plan your study time and allocate realistic amounts of time to all stages of assignment writing, including editing. There's more content over on the Unlocked Learners website, including the free Rules of Formal Assignment Writing PDF checklist. If you found this video useful, and I hope you have, remember to subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up or post a comment.